Tyron Woodly versus Gilbert Burns. Now, when this fight was announced, I was like, this is going to be fuego. It was a really exciting fight when it was announced. I think that whole welterweight division, is it? Welterweight, middleweight? Is popping. There's just so many good fights over there. You've got Covington, you've got Masvidal, you've got, Conor McGregor, who's popping in and out. You've got Kamaru Usman. And between that little triangle over there, like, you've got a lot of heat barking in. It's a Twitter feud out there in terms of all these peeps. So look, it's happening. That division is happening. So this just kind of adds to it. And coming into this, there were a couple of questions. So when Gilbert Burns versus Damian Maia was touted as the changing of the guard, the new coming in to replace the old. Obviously, you had the aging Brazilian, you had Gilbert Burns, which was the next kind of iteration, both with amazing BJJ skills, and then you had that devastating finish. And that was, to the date, Gilbert Burns' signature win in the octagon. Until yesterday, wow, didn't he dominate Tyron Woodly? And before we get into that fight, let's talk about Woodly. Woodly obviously coming off quite a long layoff. His last fight against Kamaru Usman, and we all know how that went. It was 25 minutes of domination on the part of the now champ in Kamaru Usman. And there were a lot of questions that were going to be answered by this fight. And we got quite a bit of answers, if anything. But there's still a lot of question marks in terms of that particular division and how things go on. But anyway, the short of it, look, I'm not going to go into the in-depth detail over 25 rounds. You can definitely watch that and form your own opinion. But look, this is how I saw the fight. There were two main things in the fight, and it can seem quite simple, upon just me orating it. But like, I think these things kind of add up into totality. Here's the knock on Tyron are a couple of things. And this happened as his reign as a champion. He became more kind of defensive, counter-strikerish, which kind of makes sense. I mean, you've got this whole argument by Israel Adesanya and that if people are coming to take your crown, they need to come to you. There's no need to initiate it. Okay, fair enough. Let's run on that narrative. But against Usman, he was backed up against the cage all the time. And this narrative played true here. So number one is control of the octagon. Gilbert Burns had amazing control of the octagon. And to show how important this was to him, as soon as the bell was rung, he ran. He literally ran to control the center of the octagon. And what's really important to understand is this fight was in the Apex Center in Vegas. So what's interesting about that? Well, it's a smaller octagon. So you have less to control. But when you control it, why it's so important is it gives you the freedom to really operate in terms of your spacing and your timing and your cadence in terms of deploying your various strikes, and really having that ability to do so is important. And we saw it. We definitely sort of saw it. And I think it's interesting. I heard in a podcast by Joe Rogan, which had Justin Gaethje there, and he said that in the first couple of minutes, the first dance in a fight is distance management. Who kind of sets that tone, who leads that dance. And really, we saw that dance was led by Gilbert Burns. He saw it as highly important to kind of take the center of the octagon and really dictate terms, at least from a striking perspective. And we saw it there. We saw it manifest in the first exchange. In the first major exchange where Tyron kind of fell down, I believe it was straight followed by an uppercut. It was amazing. It was like a flurry. They kind of both went for it, and Gilbert got off first. And that's the second thing. It's when you're in a striking engagement, the ability to get on first, I think, is imperative to getting momentum, but being able to kind of dictate terms. And here's the thing. There's no doubt at this stage of his career, and we definitely saw iterations of it when he was fighting, defending his belt. Tyron Woodley is a counter striker, but given to what, Daniel Cormier and to a more greater part, Michael Bisping was saying, when you are the challenger, this was almost essentially, a number one contender fight. You need to come in and take it. Like, you can't expect people to come in, not at this kind of level, and clip him. And for too long, Tyron has kind of gotten away with this. And I think it's come back to bite him. It definitely came back to bite him in this fight, where he was really looking to land a strong counter. His straight was there. He had flurries where it came out, but it didn't sort of land. So sorry, back to that particular strike. When Tyron got up, he had like an amazing an amazing cut on his eye, and I was thinking at least that wow, like this is I've seen cuts. This is almost akin to like that Nate Diaz cut, by the way, in terms of how big it was and how bleeding it was. I thought, wow, this is devastating to have this in the first round in a 25 minute like 5 round fight, and then B, if this thing keeps splitting out, there is an opportunity that the refs might stop it. Like we've seen it happen with Nate, but luckily that was put to rest because when he went to his corner, they were able to kind of get rid of that, which is amazing. Like that's amazing in itself. But yeah, look, throughout the fight, we saw these manifestations of Gilbert being able to control the center of the octagon and Tyron just coming in second. Like not Gilbert initiating basically everything. And when you compound these two things together, it really meant that on the striking, here's the thing about Gilbert Burns striking. He's a second degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. Now, what's that? I don't know what a second degree a black belt is in jiu-jitsu. So I'll definitely have a look, but I can only assume that it's better than a first degree black belt. So there's levels to his game, and he definitely came into the UFC as a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But interestingly enough, his striking is evolving. We've seen different iterations of that. We saw it against Gunnar Nelson. We saw it definitely against Damian Maia, that short hook that clipped into the ground. But he is by no means a finished product in that particular regard, which is why, and this is how I describe it. He beat thoroughly, by the way, over 25 minutes, Tyron Woodly on the feet, but he didn't outclass him per se. And it's not a knock on Gilbert Burns. It's just to say that his striking is not there yet. But it was the sharpest iteration of Gilbert Burns' exhibition of striking that we've seen. And it's a credit to him and his coach and Henry Hoof and Rufus and definitely what they're doing down there. Sorry, not Rufus, that's Tyron. Henry Hoof and the team. So they're doing amazing things down there, and you can see it. But I guess if his striking is in that particular level and he's still beating Tyron, it's because the fundamentals of getting control of that octagon. Tyron, and I saw this with a couple of fighters. They're looking for these one punch knockouts. I mean, you didn't have these flurries from Tyron, and I think at this stage of his career, he's got to rationalize in his head. And I know he's doing the singing, and like this is not an excuse and all that thing, but like he's going to have to take some to give some at this stage in his career, and he's gonna. And I think we kind of need to gamble, and it's easy for me to say it. I do get it, but at least in terms of these killers that are in the particular weight division that he's in now, like that's the case. Like the amount of abuse that Colby took in the Kamaru fight, like he knew that he had to take some to give some. So that's that heart thing that we're seeing with Tyron. And by no means am I saying he doesn't have heart, because he came out there and he really fought he really fought well. Not that he really fought amazingly well, but like he prepared himself. It's just that old habits are hard to break. I think Michael Bisping said this, and it came across there that he was finding it really hard to initiate new game plans. And interestingly enough, like you could see that during the time in the fight, he kind of got despondent, and like Dean Thomas was trying to kind of G him up and give him some sort of advice. And I think by the third round, he knew that he had lost that and he'd had to knock out. But we just didn't get that urgency. We saw flurries of it. And I think that, you know, some of the most explosive versions of Tyron that we've seen is when he comes in, you know, just throwing haymakers. And I'm not saying that he has to do that. I'm just saying that it needs to be layered in terms of that, because the whole counter-striking mantra, especially when you have some of the technical strikers at the top of that division, it's very hard to kind of pull out. Now, about Gilbert, like I thought there were a couple of interesting things when this fight was first announced. And one was, for some reason, I think that Tyron Woodley is just huge, like much bigger than Gilbert, but that's far from it. Like Gilbert is a slightly taller fighter, and he looked a little bit more solid than Tyron. They definitely didn't look out of place there, and I think Tyron felt it in the first round when he got clipped by Gilbert and he got open to cut. He felt it, and I believe it was the third or fourth round, but he got stung with a leg kick that buckled. Like there was heat coming from Gilbert's corner. He definitely's got some power on him. Like it's just not him just broadcasting to the world. Like you can definitely see it when he hits. There's heat behind like what he's throwing. Yeah, and progressively he kind of, without picking apart, he really outclassed Tyron in that particular regard, which is really amazing for a guy that was built on, his reputation being a jiu-jitsu guy. Amazing stuff. So where to for these guys? Let's talk about Tyron first. I'm not too sure. He came in saying all the right things, the interviews with the Ariel Helwanis of the world. He basically said that, he was coming in with heat. He was really saying the right things. He was G'ing himself up. And he looked in good nick. Physically, he came in looking quite well there in that particular regard. But, old habits are hard to break. So I think this goes one of two ways, in my opinion. And the two ways are this. Either he sticks it here, because I don't see him retiring. This is definitely not the end. Or he goes up a weight class. Obviously he's got that feud. Everyone's got a feud with Israel Adesanya, it feels like. But regardless of what iteration he takes or where he goes, he needs to understand that there needs to be changes. Like, if this is his last run at a title, he needs to be a little bit more reckless. He needs to unleash that inner sort of beast and really let his hands fly. I think the time for single flurries are over. Not flurries, single hits are over. He needs to follow this stuff up. He needs to build upon combinations, in my mind, and really place more emphasis on controlling the center of the octagon and putting a flag there and saying, I'm not going anywhere. You're going to have to deal severe damage to get me there. So for Gilbert, this gets really interesting. Does Gilbert leapfrog the... is Gilbert now the number one contender, essentially? I mean, you got the likes of Colby Covington, you've got Jorge Masvidal, and then you've got Kamaru Usman, who's sitting at the top of that sort of tree in that particular weight division. Yes, in that he is a factor. I don't think he's a number one contender, and this is why. Damian Maia was the first big name that he's taken out. Tyron Woodley is the second biggest name that he's taken out. Granted, it was a great performance, and there's nothing to take away there. Tyron Woodley is a champion capable of putting people to sleep, even in his current iteration. I need to see one more personally. I need to see him fight someone who's kind of at the top of his game. Tyron's taken a fairly long layoff. There's got to be some level of rust there, I would say. Although I didn't necessarily see itself play out in a physical and a timing perspective. I saw basically the old Tyron. So that's one thing. But the short of it is he's been quoted as saying that if it's not for a title, he's already said, I want Kamaru. Give me Colby. And I love that fight. That's the fight for me. I think that the UFC need to try and make Jorge and Kamaru work. Like, that's definitely the fight we want to see. And Covington and Burns is the number one contender spot. Like, that it fits neatly. It kind of makes sense. This gradual progression. If Burns beats Covington with the work rate that Covington has and the fact that he was coming across, even though he got beaten, quite an impressive fight against Kamaru Usman. He did push Usman there. That's an amazing fight. This is an amazing division. Like, there's just a lot of heat coming in, and I think we're all kind of excited to see where all the dominoes fall. Really great, really great. So look, guys, that's my little recap and summary. Please subscribe to the channel. Give us a like. If you're already a member of the channel, click the bell button to ensure that you get notifications always when we have new content. And we have a lot of new content coming in. Thanks for listening, and chat soon.